country's rising land invasions. I'm joined now by Malusi Boy, who is the MACO member for Human Settlement in Cape Town, Joburg Mayor Geoff Makhubo, and Thapelo Mohapi, spokesperson of Abahlali Basemjondolo. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Geoff. And thank you for hosting me.
Now, Mr. Makhubo, let me just start with you. Could you give us an update on the attempt to acquire land at the center of the protests, violent protests that broke out this past week in Rabi Ridge?
I think the situation in Rabi Ridge and generally in the north of Johannesburg, Midrand and surrounds, is quite unfortunate that we have had tracts of land that we had first expropriated, but it was reversed by the courts. There's a planned mega project around Midrand. Now, some of the land grabbers, I call them that, they want to jump the queue so that when a development comes there, they are first in the queue because they are residents there. I think it's quite unfortunate, the situation that has happened there. But the situation is calm now. The landowner has fenced off the land. In fact, local guys, the very ones who were invading the land, have been employed to fence off the land, and we're talking together with us in the municipality to restore order in that area.
And are they also aware about the mega city project that you just mentioned, where more developments are going to be forthcoming?
No, they are. It's been in the offing for a very, very long time. In fact, before the 2016 elections, we had gone very, very far to secure the land, to secure funding. So these are things that are happening in the city. We do understand that there are more people coming into the city, about 10,000, and they reside in informality. They get impatient. They reside in backyards. They want to jump the queue. They're not as patient as the 96,000 people on the waiting list. So we do understand that there's pressure on us to provide at least firstly housing, and secondly service stands in a proper way, so that we can develop the city in an orderly way. But we do understand what is in the offing for that area, region A of the city.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mr. Boy, according to some reports, land invasions in Cape Town are actually being fueled by the city of Cape Town not availing enough funds, in the poor and vulnerable communities. Would you agree with those sentiments, or what would you attribute the cause of this rise in land invasions to?
Afternoon, and good afternoon to the listeners. Look, there are various issues that affect land invasions or fuel land invasions. One is what I normally call shack farming, where people go and erect informal structures and rent them out. That's point number one. Number two, it's those people that are vulnerable, that indeed need houses. But now, because of the situation, you are unable to differentiate them. But thirdly, us not being wanting to provide housing opportunities to Cape Townians is not true, because we get grant funding from national government. Now they give us, I'll make an example, they'll give us per financial year, they'll give us about 600 million, which can only give you about 4,800 houses per financial year. Now it's not because we don't want to build houses, it's because the funding that we get is limited. If we were to be given enough funding to match the demand that is out there, we'll deliver. Like the mayor of Johannesburg has been saying, that you have so much resources at your disposal, but you can only be able to deliver so much to South Africans. But also, you have those people that come in who just go and invade, and they bring anarchy to the situation and create a situation now where we are unable to differentiate those who are really in need of housing.
Now, in terms of the expenses or costs incurred by the city trying to prevent or deal with this issue of land invasion, over 350 million rand has been spent. And I think the city of Cape Town has had about, over 1,000 cases of land invasion in the past year alone. Could that 350 plus million rand not have been used then to try and fuel the completion of those projects that the city is already busy with?
Well, I'm not aware of the 250 million rand that you're referring to. I mean, that is even the budget that it's not even the budget that we have received in this current financial year. I mean, our budget has been cut from 600 million in the previous financial year to about 298. this current financial aid. That is not true. I mean, it would not be in a position to spend that. But what we are doing, we are making sure that we protect the land parcel that we're going to develop. We have lost land parcels where we're going to develop more than 14,000 housing opportunities through invasion. You know, so for me, it does not make sense where you go and erect an informal structure where you know very well that in the next month or two, there was going to be a housing opportunity that would have been developed in that area. That's why I'm calling this anarchy in this entire exercise.
And which areas would you say are hotspots currently in the city of Cape Town?
Well, we have Kraaifontein, we have Fuleni, we have Khayelitsha. I mean, in Khayelitsha alone, we have lost a development of more than 11,000 housing opportunities. That's more than R500 million of worth of work that was going to be done. Those housing opportunities, those people will never be able to see them. In Kraaifontein alone, a contractor was supposed to be on site in September. In August, those people knew very well that a contractor were just waiting for the level 3 for contractors to go back on site. Then what happened? Those opportunities are gone. Site fully invaded. Now, I don't think sensible people would now go in and invade land knowing very well if they are in need of housing. Because if you are in need of a house and there's going to be a housing development, you can wait so that those houses are built and then get the opportunity. But if you're going to go and invade land when a contractor is supposed to start, I mean, there's no sense in that. That's why I'm saying there's anarchy in this entire exercise.
And I want to bring you in, Mayor Makhubo, just with regards to the hotspot areas then in the Gauteng province. Can you name them, and what is the province actually doing to try and protect those land parcels? I mean, we've heard from Cape Town about how they're trying to fence off and protect and guard those land parcels that are actually earmarked for potential projects.
Well, I can't speak for the province, but in the city of Johannesburg, the biggest hotspot is in the south of Johannesburg, you know, from the Grasmere area, the area surrounding lands. The whole of Lenasia now is surrounded by informality. There's been huge land invasions in the south of Johannesburg. Of course, there are pockets in Alexander that have been invasions under the servitudes, in the flatline. Where we come from in Ivory Park and in Rabbi Ridge the last week, we found that people invade land, do not even build shacks these days. They build brick and mortar in very, very dangerous areas where there are no services. It's around the Spruit, it's around the Jaskei River, it's on the flat line. It's actually a much danger to themselves and their families, in that there's no proper planning and there's no proper building. So these are big hotspots. But I must say, you know, there's an element that I agree with Malusi on, that we find that in areas working together with the law enforcement agencies, security agencies, that there are people, syndicates, who actually invade land, build shacks, and they sell them off either to foreign nationals or to poor people who are definitely in need of land. And that, I think, is preying on the poor, and it's completely unacceptable. We've invoked the security cluster, the police, the intelligence, the crime intelligence. We're working on it because it's the same people, whether you go to the south, or whether you come to the N12 invasions, we're finding that the same names keep on coming up, and these names are known by the police. And when you go there, when you go and actually find out the people living there, large majority of them are not South Africans. So they're preying on needy foreign nationals who pay rent or buy these shares from them. So some of it is not really need for land. It's something else. It's a business activity. But we are sympathetic to those who need accommodation, who need shelter, who come from the Eastern Cape, from Limpopo, from Northwest, from Mpumalanga, coming to Johannesburg looking for opportunities. We do sympathize, and we do have a thing that working together with province, we must find a solution for those.
Well, let's continue our discussion on land invasion. I'm still joined by Malusi Boy, who is a MECO member for Human Settlements in Cape Town, Geoff Makhubo, the City of Johannesburg Mayor, and Thapelo Mohapi, who is the spokesperson of Abahlali Basemjondolo. Gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us. Now, Thapelo, just coming to you, Abahlali Basemjondolo actually campaigned both against evictions and also for public housing. What would you say are some of the causes of people resorting to land invasion or land grabs?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. First and foremost, we don't have. I don't think that we should be using the language such as invasions, anarchy against the poorest of the poor in this country. We know very well that there is a crisis when it comes to housing, and nationally in this country. That housing that is supposed to be provided to the poorest of the poor is either lost along the line in corruption. And we know very well that a lot of people have been homeless in this country as a result of the impact of the pandemic. A lot of people were evicted, a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people, for instance, in Cape Town, had to resort into occupying land that is vacant as a result of them not having any place to stay. I do not think that we should be sitting here as leaders and criminalizing struggles of the ordinary people on the ground. There is a dire need for housing. There's a dire need for shelter. There are a lot of people who are homeless right now as a result of the pandemic. And I think what we should be asking ourselves as the leaders, political figures who are running different governments, instead of pumping millions into anti-land invasion units to attack harmless people who are poor, whose struggles is actually to have a shelter and a roof over their head, is to say, do we have a political will to actually deal with this crisis that we are having that has been added by the fact that we had a pandemic that rendered people homeless as a result of being unemployed? Instead of using armed forces against the poorest of the poor, people who are defenseless, who are just struggling to get a roof over their head. Thank you very much.
Well, my understanding is that the force is used against those who are doing things illegally, but I'll get Mr. Boy just to respond to that issue of the poorest of the poor who have reasonably and understandably been affected by the pandemic and have become homeless as a result. Is the use of force against people in that category still heavy-handed when it comes to how the city's been dealing with people that are occupying land illegally?
Look, I want to go back to this point that keeps on being hammered by Chape around people being evicted. State organs have not evicted people during COVID-19. I mean, ever since it started. Now, what they should have done, if they were proactive in their approach, is to approach the landlords, because it's not us as government who have evicted people. It's the landlords where people were residing, where they were unable to pay that rental that they are referring to indicate to them that the regulations do not permit them to evict those people. Because now what they are doing, they are shifting blame from the landlords to government, and it's not supposed to be the case. What the government as well as indicated on the regulations of the disaster management is that land invasion is not permitted. They must read the regulation. The people who are in the wrong are the landlords who have evicted people. It's not us. We have the responsibility to protect the land parcels that are earmarked for development, because there are people who have been waiting, who have been on our waiting list for a very long time. Now, what are they saying about those people? They are very mute on that point. Because here they tend to make themselves victims and not following the process. That's why I'm saying there's anarchy. Because anarchy is when you allow a process, you destabilize law and order. There's no law and order on what they're doing. There's no discipline on what they're doing. Because if they were champions of and sympathizing with the poor, they should have gone to the landlords and said, you are not allowed to evict people. We have not evicted people as a city. We have protected land parcels that are being invaded. That is our responsibility, because there are people who are waiting for houses whom we have committed to, and we need to deliver on those people. Now, they should be doing the other way around. They are creating this impression that we've victimized them. We have not. We utilize the entire budget that is allocated to the city to make sure that we build for the poor, because we sympathize with the poor. We sympathize with those people who come from poor background. The backyarders, we sympathize with them. We buy land, we earmark land for those poor people. But what do? They go and invade the very same land that is earmarked for poor people. Is that discipline?
No, Mr. Makhubo, I want you to respond
it's
to
anarchy.
that.
That's the only explanation.
Yes, I just want Mr. Makhubo to actually come in. With regards to the discussion with landlords, were there any discussions that Abahlali Basemjondolo had with some of the landlords during that period where, of course, people might have lost their jobs due to COVID-19 to actually communicate to the landlords that they cannot legally evict people as a result of them losing their jobs being the reason why they can't pay their rent?
Okay, maybe let me just first and foremost deal with the fact that the city of Cape Town has not evicted anyone. What happened in Empolweni is an eviction. People were stripped of their dignity. Someone was, while they were, Mr. Polani was stripped of his dignity. What is happening right now in the old Woodstock Hospital and Sea Point is obviously that. People who are poor are evicted not only by private owners of property, but also by the city itself. The city does play a role in terms of evictions. I think the issue here is that there is no, the government, whether it's the ANC in Johannesburg, whether it's the DA in Cape Town and the ANC as well in Durban, is that instead of going to at the bottom of the issue from below and engaging with the poorest of the poor, they think on behalf of the poor and they finish on behalf of the poor without engaging the poor on the ground. And as a movement, as an activist that comes from a movement, I have seen the dire need of housing. I've seen the desperation of people. People don't just go and occupy land. There's always that vacant gap where the state does not come in to actually meet the poorest of the poor halfway in order to deal with this issue. And I think the only way is when government engage with the poorest of the poor in the manner that they will engage with anyone else, because people can be solutions to their problems. However, having said that, I think it was put outside that evictions were not allowed during the lockdown. And of course, some of the landlords did not comply with what the government was doing. So it's the same elitist people who his interest is for profit, and life of the ordinary people on the ground is put, profit is put before the lives of the people on the ground. And that is supported by our governments, either in Cape Town or in the Western Cape or in Johannesburg, in Gauteng and in Durban. So once we realize that we should start from, we have a bottom-up system where people on the ground are engaged on issues that are affecting them. People don't know that the land that they've occupied was earmarked for housing. However, the land has been vacant for more than 20 years. Some of the land that people moved in has been in existence for years, and money that was supposed to be developing those areas had somehow disappeared somewhere, because we know that we have a serious pandemic in this country, which is corruption. We know what had happened during the pandemic, where money was disappearing during which was supposed to actually provide or improve the lives of the poorest of the poor during the pandemic. So what is happening here is we have a crisis, and therefore as political figures who have constituencies must go back and say, do we really have a political will to deal with the situation rather than to criminalize people on the ground? And are we engaging?
Mr. Makhubo, let me just bring in then the Mayor, Geoff Makhubo. Mayor, when it comes to the city of Johannesburg then, with regards to engaging the communities that are affected, engaging the poorest of the poor, I believe you mentioned it earlier on, but just to reiterate, is there communication between the government, between the city and the communities that are going to benefit from these projects? Was it a matter of these land parcels being sort of cordoned off and protected without the communities actually being aware of what's going on?
In fact, that vacant land that you're talking about has been protected by communities that know that they would benefit in a long time. So as I say, we were contacted by communities who've been protecting that land, that look, there is a problem. There are people we don't know are now coming to invade this land, and that means that the land has been vacant for a number of periods. So the poorest of the areas in Johannesburg are actually led by the councillors of the ANC. We talk to communities on a continuous basis. They know our plans, they know our 5-year ADPs, they know the limitations of budget. So we do talk to communities, we do tell them about long-term plans, of course. Part of the problem with the pandemic is that now it's limited resources. The budgets have been shrinking. The envelope to local government has reduced. The grant funding is being reduced. So it's going to take longer and longer. Yes, patients are wearing out, but I can tell you there is an element of criminality here. These are not communities who've been waiting patiently for a long time, because those, they've got C forms, they've got a problem. When you go to communities like this past week, I was in the very, very same area that was invaded. It's next to what you call Kanana Park and Rabi Ridge. Talking to communities, talking to leadership of various organizations, talking to activists, to NGOs around, to faith-based organizations. In fact, taxi organizations intervened in that standoff, because they were on the side of saying, we've been waiting and we're waiting for this project to come through. Now, I don't want to use strong words like anarchy and all that, but we will not stand for any illegality that festers in the city, because you allow illegality once. It's lawlessness, and it's one way downwards. It will spiral out of control. Because these communities, they're going to occupy illegally, and then they're going to come to government to demand services, and so it's going to be an unending needs of communities to government. So let's work. We work together with our communities. We try and engage. As I say, in the south of Johannesburg, we do have the names of the ringleaders. Some of them have gone underground. We do know these syndicates. We do know some of the organizations they belong to. It's just a matter of time that this will be exposed. And they are so organized that they actually are fighting with the security forces. These are not the poor of the poorest. I have a video with one of the recipients, or somebody who bought a shack, came from the East End actually. He heard that people are being allocated stands. The person went back and said, look, I'm not going to be part to this. He says to me he paid 2,000 rands to a certain person at a certain address that we know. So this, I've got a video with this, talking to that old man. So people are preying on the poor. I am on the side of the poor. The poor must be serviced. They come from the rural areas looking for opportunities in the urban areas. It's a responsibility of government to take care of the poor people in our locality. And indeed, we are doing that. But the rate of delivery of houses is slower than the demand, as the demand increases.
Well, gentlemen, we have to leave it there for this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. That was Mayor Geoff Makhubo, the City of Johannesburg's Mayor, Malusi Boy, Meko Member for Human Settlements in the City of Cape Town, and Abahlali Basemjondolo spokesperson Thapelo Mohapi.